Donald Trump is at it again. He yesterday, July 10th, he issued a letter to Prime Minister Mark Carney saying that he was going to slap a 35% tariff on all Canadian imports because I don't know, we've hurt his feelings again. The Green Party has held a press conference today, actually, and they talked about what Canada should do to respond. I'm going to talk to co-leader Elizabeth May. So welcome to the interview.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you so much.
May I first say, this is how Westminster parliamentary democracy is supposed to work. Opposition parties don't just criticize, they come forward with ideas. So kudos to you because you're the only one so far that has.
Well, thank you. And I hope because we're just starting that relationship in Parliament, and I'd say it didn't start off well in terms of a spirit of collaboration because Prime Minister Carney was able to find all the votes he needed to push through things that I personally found deeply offensive. But the Conservative Party backed the Liberal moves on both programming motions to rush through and a very problematic piece of legislation, C5. I still hope, and I hope the press conference and our efforts today come through to Mr. Carney, as I hope it does to Canadians, as we're here trying to help. We are on Team Canada, and Trump's letter was deeply offensive and should be to all Canadians. And how do we respond to that in a way that gets Donald Trump to, I don't know if we can ever get anything to get him to leave us alone or deal with us in a way that is respectful or in any way trustworthy. But then our point is, as Greens, then we work around him. We protect our economy. We work with allies who are reliable, and we don't back down.
You came out with three ideas today, and some of them you've talked about before. The implementing the digital services tax. Now, this was announced. In fact, it had been implemented in 2024, rescinded because of Trump's complaints. But we're also Canada's part of the EU, the Pillar One initiative, and you think that that should go forward as quickly as possible. Please explain.
Well, also it was an act of parliament. I don't think Mark Carney can unilaterally undo an act of parliament that says we're going to apply a digital services tax. So what I understand him to have done in parliamentary terms was to say we're not going to start applying it on this date. So that's an instruction to Minister of Finance. It doesn't repeal the act. So I think we're in a good position for Mr. Carney to say, in good faith, Mr. President, I did what you asked, and then this makes it impossible for me to continue down that road. I would hope that Mark Carney is reflecting on the criticism he received from people who would normally be his allies, prominent federal liberals like former Finance Minister Lloyd Axworthy, who actually I wouldn't, he did say that Carney's approach was bootlicking and it wasn't going to work. And then we have Nobel Prize winning economics professor Joseph Stiglitz saying this is not a good idea. We need the digital services tax. It's important in a global context. And then we also had, of course, an open letter from the leading Canadian experts on the impact of these digital giants on Canadian society, saying reconsider. So I feel very strongly as leader of the Green Party and as a member of Parliament that we need to implement the digital services tax, strengthening our allyship with countries that are like-minded.
Elizabeth, earlier in the year, your party introduced the idea of strategic reserve, starting with potash. Maybe you could explain what that means.
Yeah, we only have one strategic reserve of natural resources in Canada right now. It's managed by the Quebec government and it's maple syrup. But we can maintain strategic reserves of our natural resources so they're used to the benefit of the Canadian economy. Canadians believe this is, and the Green Party of Canada believes this is a very strong, viable measure to protect our economy and workers in the resource sector by buying up our own resources, keeping them in Canada, and choosing with whom we trade.
And one of the things I like about the proposal is you very deliberately target core Trump constituencies, like potash gets at the corn farmers.
And a lot of the corn production in the United States is heavily pork barreled, subsidized, and a lot of it is for ethanol, which is not a climate solution when there's that much fossil fuel input into producing the corn. Canadian, the American agricultural lobby needs Canadian potash. That's a core US Republican base. And those are Trump supporters, and those are the people we want to hurt, not because we're vindictive, but because that's the base that will get Trump to leave Canada alone and let us get on with our lives and build our economy without his threats.
Before we get to the third point, I want to make the point here that we are often some of our politicians are a little intimidated by the fact that the country that's 10 times bigger than we are and our biggest trading partner makes threats against us. But we forget the strategic power we have as key suppliers of things that their economy needs. And energy media is about mostly we do energy reporting,
Yes.
and 70% of their heavy crude oil refineries were designed specifically for Alberta crude. That
Yeah.
makes
And
them dependent on us. And
that's
we
right.
shouldn't be afraid to use that kind of leverage.
And again, potash is a perfect example. It's a Saskatchewan product. We built into the proposal. We had the Parliamentary Budget Office cost out for us, doing this with the built into our budget, storing the potash because you can't just leave it lying out of doors for a year. We put all that in our plans. But I mean, when you look at exporting raw logs, why on earth do we export raw logs? That should be a strategic reserve that gets raw logs to Canadian mills, that we get the value added before export. This is just part of reimagining the Canadian economy as an economy that serves Canadians, our workers, and our industries.
Number three, financing reserves via savings Canadian bonds, offering a 5% interest. And, I remember, I'm old enough to remember when Canadian savings bonds were a big deal. And I, in fact, had a number of them myself. Please explain that.
Well, we again we put this ask to the Parliamentary Budget Office, what would it cost us to float these bonds that Canadians could buy? So individual Canadians, not banks, not brokers, we can buy this as a saving and investment vehicle. We invest in our own economy. We get a guaranteed return on that investment of 5%. That's pretty darn good. And Canadians can invest in our own fight to keep our elbows up, buy up our own potash so potash producers aren't disadvantaged by Trump's threats, and we hang on to that. The value of the potash is only going to go up, but the return on investment is guaranteed in the way we've costed this out. And it's published on the Parliamentary Budget Office website if anyone wants to check. So it can be applied to other natural resources as well. We start with potash, frankly, because it's a strategic and one resource only. We can go at it more easily than some of the others, but it's not interfering with provincial jurisdiction because what we're saying is the federal government will buy it and hold it in a crown corporation. So we're not taking anything from provinces. We're saying to producers, you could sell to us, federal government, crown corporation. We are your reliable partner, and the people of Canada have created the financing that makes this happen.
Elizabeth, let's talk about, we'll wrap up the interview this way, and that is, you floated some of these ideas before. Are you getting any kind of positive feedback from the Prime Minister's office, from the Prime Minister or cabinet ministers that suggest they might be open to them?
Not yet, not yet, but I live in hope, Mark. We have good ideas, and I'm more than happy. Other parties in the past have taken our ideas and implemented them, and we don't mind. I mean, if the number of from same-sex marriage to legalizing cannabis to being the first party to propose that we actually needed carbon pricing, and again, how sadly that has gone. But we don't mind if other parties take our ideas and implement them, especially where, again, we do our homework. These are practical ideas; they will work. And obviously, if our approach to Donald Trump is when he says jump, we say how high, we're not going to get anywhere with this administration. And we need to protect our economy. We need to the greatest extent possible, insulate ourselves from a rogue state with a rogue president.
Yeah, our position here at Energy Media is that we think the idea of free trade within the provinces is a very good one. We think the idea of doing projects nation building projects like an integrated national power grid is a good one. We think that building out ports and other export infrastructure so that we can tap Asian and European market, all of that is good. But that takes years. It is not, this is, and we're dealing with threats that are taking place on a almost daily basis. And some of these proposals that you've suggested here can be implemented quickly. And I think there's some merit to that. We should at least, at the very least, have a robust conversation about them.
Yeah. And the measures we put forward don't require parliamentary action. They don't require new legislation. They don't even require a different approach to a budget. We can do these things quickly. Again, though, I think an east, west, north, south electricity grid can be done more quickly. The difficulty is not in how long it takes to do it, but in getting the individual provinces and their monopolistic utilities that operate within separate fiefdoms to agree. And that may take legislation to say we're going to separate out, as they have in Europe. You can't be an electricity producer and an electricity distributor. You choose, you're one or the other. And then we can get a handle on making sure we have, as the European Union, between 23 separate nation states, has a functional electricity grid that allows them all to be integrated. That's what we need for Canada's 10 provinces, 3 territories. This shouldn't be too hard to do relatively quickly, and it shouldn't take long to actually make sure it's 100% renewable electricity, since we're already at about 80% zero carbon electricity as it stands. We have a lot of hydro. We can do a lot more with wind and solar. And once we use the grid like a giant battery, we can get past this fallacious argument about peak and base load, and we can just know we've got 100% renewable electricity, and we can put it in the grid when we don't need it. We'll pull it out of the grid when we need it, and we need a functioning east, west, north, south electricity grid, and that includes up into the territories.
Elizabeth, thank you very much for this. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mark. Great to see you again.